Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcoming you to the Cheryl Chumley Hour with Cheryl Chumley, online opinion editor for the Washington Times and author of The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, and author of Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. Cheryl, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much.
It's always good to see you. There's so much going on. Having you right there in Washington as an online opinion editor for the Washington Times, you're plugged into the real headlines, the real things that are happening in D.C., and it's such a valuable resource for us, and we appreciate that. I want to open with a quote from Mike Huckabee. Earlier this month, he said that the media hates Donald Trump more than they love America. I'm starting to wonder if the Democrats and these 9 specific traitor Republicans hate Donald Trump more than they love America.
Well, certainly you can make the case that Senator John McCain hates Donald Trump more than he loves America. And I've been pretty blistering on John McCain for some time, but particularly this last week, he has really angered a lot of people. And I think he's angered people that were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt up until this point, turn kind of a blind eye toward his usual rhino ways, and side with him because of his war hero status and so forth. But this latest vote, this latest Senate charade that he did with the whole thumbs down and then lumbering back to his seat, and that video clip was played over and over. I think Americans, and particularly those conservative Americans who voted for Donald Trump, for 2 main reasons: to repeal Obamacare and to secure the borders. And here they have every chance available to them to repeal Obamacare quickly. They have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and yet they still cannot get it done. And John McCain has come forward as kind of the face of that rhino enemy. And I think Republicans are making a huge mistake if they do not come up with a repeal bill quickly in time for the 2018 campaign season.
They announced today that they're pulling back off of health care and they're moving on to tax reform. They've had enough of the Obamacare discussion, and it's truly been one of the biggest wastes of time in American history that the campaign was won on those issues. There were 5 key points on the platform that America voted for. And having representation in Washington who are so self-serving, so partisan aligned, party alignment, that they have become an impediment to the welfare of America. Yeah.
I think you put your thumb on the problem right there. The special rights that Congress gets above and beyond all others, and that's in fact what I'm writing about. As soon as we conclude this interview, I will be looking into some of those special perks. But the problem is Congress is not in touch with the regular people of America. They are sheltered and living in a bubble. And while members of the House said Obamacare is dead, they're moving on, the latest news just breaking now is some in the Senate actually are listening to Trump's many, many tweets over the weekend where he has chastised and scolded them for failing to pass this Senate repeal bill. And now the Senate may, in fact, be bringing up a new bill created by Lindsey Graham, which tells you it's not definite that it's going to be a full repeal, but it's something to bring forward and discuss again. And instead of going on their normal August recess, they have in fact pulled back on 2 weeks of their vacation, and they're staying on Capitol Hill. So let's not throw everything out just yet. We shouldn't throw the white towel in yet, because Trump has pushed forward some rhetoric that is getting the Senate's attention, and they are taking up another bill, it seems to be, this week.
Well, I think that's significant, and I'm glad to see the movement. You know, the larger question is should health care be a federal program?
I don't think it should be at all. Where in the Constitution does it say that the job of Congress, the job of the White House, is to provide every man, woman, and child in America with taxpayer-funded health care? This issue has been convoluted because what's been allowed to go forth is the Democrats have been able to press a message that health care is a right. And that's not really what we're talking about here. We're not talking about somebody's right to be healthy. We're talking about health care being provided by the taxpayers being a right. So Democrats have been a little bit clever on this angle, and they've gotten the message out, health care is a right, and now that's the rhetoric that's being tossed around. But we have to remember what we're talking about here is the United States of America founded on a constitution that calls for limited government, a capitalistic system. And does that mean health care paid for by the taxpayers is a right? That's what we're discussing. And unfortunately, Republicans have turned kind of a blind eye toward that argument, and they've ceded that issue. And that's really what we need to be talking about.
Yeah, healthcare providers, insurance companies are structured. Some of them are not-for-profits. Some of them are membership entities where you get insurance as a member. I was with AT&T during the divestiture years, the deregulation and the split up of the company. And what that did was that took a monopoly, broke it into operating companies, and allowed fair competition across state lines and corporate lines so that there was no ownership of the telecommunications network in America. What that did was that brought healthy competition. What we see in the cell phone market, wireless carriers, it's getting to be very, very, very competitive, and prices are coming down on services, data is becoming larger packages, and there's competition. The government has insinuated itself into a business, the insurance business, and they have no business in any business. The Constitution says that they're to provide for the common defense, ensure domestic tranquility. I don't feel good about career politicians making decisions about my tax dollars going to subsidize medical programs. These rates should be so much lower than they are, and the initial presentation is that let's go to a free enterprise system of competitive health insurance. That means repeal Obamacare and be done, not replace it with another system. So I don't understand why the conservative base in the House and in the Senate do not take a stand and say, hold on a second, let's back up a minute. Why are we looking to move Washington? If we're looking to scale back, if we're looking to drain the swamp, now the sewer, of entitlement programs and career politicians and appointees as opposed to elected officials, and move the regulatory bodies out of Washington, why are they discussing health care as a program? Why don't they do away with it and just say health care like car sales? You go to the dealer you want to go. You negotiate your best possible rate. And we would see a stimulus program within the healthcare marketplace that would be incredible. And people's insurance rates would go down. Consumers would have more disposable income if they weren't paying such outlandish healthcare rates. So why aren't we discussing that?
I understand why. I just do not agree with it. The reason why Republicans at this point in time don't want to simply repeal Obamacare is because, politically speaking, what you're doing is you're putting your seat in danger because you're pulling out benefits that I think it's something like 12 million Americans now have. 12 million Americans now have health care where they did not before. And so what would happen is the Republicans, to repeal Obamacare, the Democrats would sell it, true or not, that the Republicans have stripped this health care, this God-given, necessary, needed health care from poor women and children who've done nothing except have been saved by Obamacare. And so now here come the big bad Republicans coming in and stripping and pulling this health care coverage away from these poor women and children. So I understand politically that is why some Republicans on Capitol Hill do not want to make that move. I just think they're completely wrong, because the people who would express outrage at that are the people who would express outrage at anything Republicans do.
Right.
These aren't Republican voters. They're not Republican friends. They're the loudmouth left, the progressives, the mainstream media that just don't want Republicans in power at all and will seize on whatever platform, whatever point they can to show Republicans in a bad light. And one very easy way to do that is to show how Republicans hate children, Republicans target women. And so that's why some Republicans on Capitol Hill don't want to simply repeal Obamacare, because they're afraid of making that leap of faith, and they're afraid of being shown come their election season that they were the bad guys to pull these necessary benefits away from the poor children and so forth. I think that they should take an example from Donald Trump, who's bold, who rose into office based on bold platforms, saying we are America, this is a free market system. I think they should just piggyback on those arguments that won Trump his office and make the same bold claims and say, look, we're a free market system. We're a capitalistic country. We need to put healthcare back into the private sector and sell that to the people who are the voters in America who vote Republican.
Oh, I completely agree with you. There's been so much time invested that this debate, this ongoing debate, has cost the taxpayers in terms of resources, in terms of cost of government. It's already cost millions upon millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars. That there's legislation that should be already enacted within the first 6 months of this presidency that has not been enacted. There's now issues which are of global import, that we got this distraction, which of course has been the liberal left's policy all along, is the more we can confuse, the more we can distract, the more we can direct the narrative, the more we can get away with in Washington. And their strategy seems to be working, and I don't understand why the American public, for example, why are they still buying advertising on CNN or MSNBC, or why are corporations continue to support a false narrative and false news reports? We're America. You vote with your wallet. You stop buying and stop supporting and stop paying for advertising. We saw what happened to Bill O'Reilly. His name comes up, and all of a sudden, supporters. Tiger Woods. What happened? All the endorsements went away. So we know how to affect change. It's with our wallets. But why are companies still supporting? And these are conservative corporations and conservative leaders who represent conservative businesses, but they're not willing to take a stand. So they say that they are conservative, they'll vote conservative, but yet they're letting their advertising dollars continue to fund this false, the New York Times reports, the list goes on and on. Where is the voice of the conservative movement?
Well, I think the voice of the conservative movement is the voice that spoke strongly at election time. You know, you cannot discount, and you and I have talked about this before, and I stand strong by it. I wrote about it in both my books, and I still write about it whenever I can and speak about it. You cannot discount the power of the mainstream media to put forth a message that just becomes the talk of the media day. It's one cycle after another. You have, let's just look at Russia. Russia and the whole collusion thing is just a ridiculous message. It's a ridiculous story. There's absolutely no basis. There's no factual evidence to show that anyone on Trump's team colluded with Russia to boot Hillary Clinton from the campaign trail and steal the White House from her. That is the message, though, that the left has been pushing since November, since the day after Trump won. And yet, there's no factual evidence. So what's driving it? It's the media. It's simply the media. They keep digging up one little nugget after another. They get James Comey to make a statement. They get Mueller to launch an investigation. They get Chuck Schumer to weigh in on it. And then next thing you know, that becomes the next media cycle for the next 4, 6, 8 hours, what have you. And so the average American flipping on the television at any given time sees and hears a new face talking about the latest nugget about Russia. And what's being blasted on the bottom of the screen is yet another just 5-word sentence about Trump collusion and so forth. And that becomes embedded in the consumer's mind as the next headline. But you have to remember, you have to be a savvy American patriot and actually look at more media sources than just one, or glancing at a quick headline throughout the day. You have to realize that these things are media generated. And what they do then is they allow Democrats to fundraise off of them. So it becomes this cycle where the media puts on pundits that says what the media wants, which is anti-Trump. And then the Democratic Party can seize upon that and use that to fundraise and fight in the political arena what the media is doing in the news. It's just this mad cycle, and it's ongoing. But I think the true conservative voice in America is aware of what's going on, because look who won the White House. Right. Look who holds the majorities in the House and the Senate. I think Americans are becoming wise to this, and they're willing to wait to put their voice at the ballot box.
So the midterm elections are really going to be the tell. We've already had 2 congressional runoffs and 2 Republican victories, Georgia and I forget the other one that was several months back. This change in the White House Chief of Staff, the White House leaks to the media, Reince Priebus being moved out, and basically he was outed as one of the leakers by Fox News resource.
Well,
is this an inherent part of Washington's problem? Is just corruption at its complete and deepest levels?
Pretty much. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. And I also think this whole White House shakeup, for most Americans, they could care less. They don't care if Reince Priebus is in the White House versus Anthony Scaramucci or Mucci. It's more a media thing. It impacts those who cover the White House news and so forth, and those who have sources within the White House. But the average American, they care about jobs, they care about the borders, and honestly, they care the heck out of Obamacare repeal. And I think that this is also another media-driven thing, that it distracts from the main platforms coming out of the White House, the main agenda that Trump ran on and wants to see realized. And it gives, it gives the media something a little bit gossipy to talk about, which is probably good for ratings. But you have to remember, I don't think most Americans care about Reince Priebus and his fate.
Well, I don't think they care about Reince Priebus or Scaramucci or the person. I think what America cares about is that Washington corruption, and that people cannot be trusted. And if they can't be trusted, and they have control, and they're the party in control, and they can't be trusted, then what do we have? We elected these Republicans, put them into office to give them the majority, of Congress and of the White House, and the message is that they're not trustworthy. And that's the bottom line. Now you can put names to it, and it looks like they're going to do full-scale research and plug as many leaks as they possibly can. That's a national security issue. That's a national trust issue, that if you can have somebody who is a White House chief of staff leaking information, you're talking about somebody that's been cleared at a high level of security clearance with access to top secret information, and they're a resource for a media outlet? What other things are being told that aren't being published? And who else is listening?
Right. When you said that the national security issue, bingo, that's it right there. That's what Americans care about. So when they see these shakeups, it's not so much the faces, the names. It's what's happening in the White House that's affecting our national security. And what's curious to me is that there's this huge story going on right now in the Democratic Party with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and a former, now fired IT guy, Imran Arwan. I forget exactly.
Pakistani, right?
But he's a Pakistani-born guy who was hired by Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2005 to do IT work for the Democrats in the House. And since 2009, he and his two brothers have managed to collect $4 million or so in taxpayer funding for their supposed part-time consulting IT work. Now, the two brothers have gone and taken their wives back to Pakistan. Arwan was just busted and stopped at Dulles Airport trying to board an airplane to go back to Pakistan after having wired himself about $300,000 at a bank at an overseas account. And the FBI stopped him because they want to know exactly what he was doing during his months and years in the House that could show a national security risk to Americans. He's been brought up on charges, bank fraud, mortgage fraud, and so forth. But there were also some smashed hard drives recovered from his computers at his home that he's been fighting to get back. We don't know what's on those hard drives yet. He did have a lot of access to Democrat House members, their files, their computers filing, and so forth. And all we know basically is that Debbie Wasserman Schultz held him in high enough of regard that she didn't fire him until after he was arrested, even though she knew, like the rest of the House members, in February he was placed under FBI watch. Now, this has all the makings of some kind of made-for-TV movie, but there's some real concerns about spying going on. And so while we're looking at Russia and collusion, this is what's been going on the Democratic side.
Well, the investigation, which was supposed to be into the Russian collusion that was going to implicate Donald Trump and his campaign team, has implicated Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. When are we going to renew the Clinton Foundation investigation? When are we going to renew the email investigation? The thing that concerns me, and it's kind of tied to the Attorney General position, because that's where these investigations would come out. With Jeff Sessions, what happened with his recusal from the Russian investigation without telling the president that that was his intention, doing it independent, has given him a vote of no confidence basically from the president. So is there change in the wind, and will the person that gets put into the AG role, do you think that they will take up the campaign and banner, or that Donald Trump's selection will be based on somebody who's going to renew the investigation into the improprieties of the entire Obama administration and the Clinton Foundation?
I don't think Jeff Sessions is going away anytime soon. I think that Trump lit a fire under him, and he came out and he announced a couple of investigations and so forth that he's been looking into. And I actually think that you might be hearing more from the Attorney General's office insofar as what investigations they're going to do going forward. I think that Trump has been rightly upset with Sessions for being so quiet on some of those issues that you just named, issues that were talked about all along on the campaign trail that got American voters kind of hyped up, thinking we were going to get some real justice for some high-ranking political figures that seem to have skated on scandals in past years. And now, like you just pointed out, those things have seemed to have gone by the wayside. So I do think that Congress can take it on itself to launch some investigations that themselves, for instance, let's bring Debbie Wasserman Schultz before some committees in Congress to explain what she knew. And let's get the media covering those with some high profile coverage. But I also think that Sessions is probably going to be a little bit more vocal about what he's doing in office to not only show the American people that he actually is investigating these things, but to kind of do some job security with Donald Trump.
Well, I think it's important that we if we're going to drain the swamp, which was Ronald Reagan term that's been applied to this administration's agenda, that you have to get in there, you have to drain it and see what's at the bottom of it, because everything's sunk to the bottom. Now things are starting to surface, and you know that the Obama administration's collusion with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the agenda of the Islamization of America and being the next great wave of Muslim migration and immigration, form of passive jihad to come increase their numbers, even to the point where there are mosques being built with Saudi Arabia money in cities that don't have a Muslim population yet, but the cities are preparing for the influx. We're talking with Cheryl Chumley during the Cheryl Chumley Hour here on Revealing the Truth. She's the online opinion editor for the Washington Times and the co-host of this hour with me this time every month, and we just so enjoy our time with Cheryl, author of The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, and Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue this discussion of Washington, what's going on. We're going to talk about Russia, Russia sanctions, North Korea, and more. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The Teaching Archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, Prophecy in the News videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this is the Cheryl Chumley Hour. Cheryl is the online opinion editor of the Washington Times and author of The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, and Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. Cheryl, welcome back to the program.
Thanks.
I'm looking at a quote that came out yesterday in regards to United States allies prepared to use overwhelming force in North Korea. This is a quote from General Terrence O'Shaughnessy, U.S. Pacific Air Force's commander, that the U.S. and allies are prepared to use rapid, lethal, and overwhelming force if necessary against North Korea. This situation has escalated just in the last 90 days to a point where I think it's a surprise to Americans. Does it seem like all of the worldwide apology tour of the Obama administration, the State Department's position of we'll talk to everybody, we'll apologize for our former behavior, and that we gave up a great deal of intelligence, and now we're finding out that there's things going on that we were just not aware of?
Well, I think when you hear from your own U.S. government that they were taken a little bit off guard about how far the missile that North Korea just launched could go, I don't think that's a comfortable situation for any American. We don't like to think that our U.S. government has been taken off guard by anything. But North Korea has been a thorn in America's side for decades. And I say this because not only have analysts said it time and time again, but I was in the Army. I was stationed in South Korea, and as part of our monthly training program. We would go and guard the wall, and we would do that with the scenario being that the North Koreans had overrun South Korea, breached the borders, and so forth. And it was just part of our training. And that was decades ago. So North Korea is not a surprise in being an aggressive force. What is a surprise, perhaps, is that the developments that they've made in missiles, sadly, has now pretty much put it within reach of harming America. And that's something that President Donald Trump does not have the luxury of ignoring. Now, former President Barack Obama could talk all he wanted. He spent 8 years pretty much talking and doing little else, which is part of the reason why North Korea has been able to advance so far, I would say. And so now Trump has to actually respond to these aggressions, and it's not going to be talk that makes Kim Jong-un settle down. Nikki Haley has indicated over the weekend that she's not interested in meeting with emergency UN officials to discuss this latest test firing because, as she says, what's the point? The more we talk and do nothing, the more it emboldens North Korea. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, has been saying for some time that regime change is the only way to get North Korea to calm down. And then you have Jim Mattis coming out and saying that we're not quite at that point yet. So, it's definitely not the Barack Obama administration where diplomacy is going to be drilled into our heads for the next 4 to 8 years, and that's all that's going to be done. I don't think we're at the point yet of regime change, of bringing in our military, but there are other matters that could be done. You and I were just discussing the possibility of things like EMP, where they magnetic pulses that disrupt their grids and their grid powers over in North Korea. There's cybersecurity and hacking that could perhaps be done as an act of aggression against North Korea to get their leadership to tone it down. But I definitely think that this administration is not going to just go quietly into that good night like the Obama White House did. And it's going to be one missile test firing after another with no response from America.
Well, I looked at the statement from Ambassador Nikki Haley, and she closed her statement with, China must decide whether it is finally willing to take this vital step of sending a message to the North Korean dictator that the international community is unwilling. Are they willing or unwilling to seriously challenge him? And so, this is a throwdown. And this dictator has made the statement that if anybody attacks North Korea, China, Japan, anybody, that he will retaliate with an attack on U.S. soil. That's a serious threat.
It is a serious threat. And, it's up to the analysts and the experts to decide how much actual action is behind that threat. Because, of course, North Korea, this is what they do. They threaten. And they threaten, not just America. They threaten South Korea. They threaten everybody who's allied with America practically. So, with them taking these test firings to new levels, I think we have to regard those threats with a little bit more seriousness than we would have just a few years ago. But as far as America going in and doing a regime change by ourselves, I think we need some, support from the world community. But I actually think that even China would be behind that. And I do think that we would have a lot more support at the UN level than some on the Democratic side would need to make. Some on the Democratic side who just want us to sit back and do as the previous administration did and just try and be diplomats in this whole endeavor.
The question's really going to be is that if North Korea is this credible threat and there is this rumbling or this undertone of a military response, Congress was pretty clear in the Tomahawk missile barrage against Syria that any further military actions in that particular region need to be brought before Congress for them to approve. I don't hear Congress making any statements. I don't hear anybody outside of Nikki Haley and this Asia Pacific region Air Force. The White House is making some statements, but the Senate has been awfully quiet about these responses that are in response to the threat, saying that we will, as he puts it, rapid, lethal, and overwhelming force. You know, does this fall under that 60 days of you can do what you want, but if you go past that, you're going to have Congress approval? Or is this something that becomes an agenda item and is taken up on the Senate floor?
It's kind of funny you just said that about Congress being quiet, because they are. They have been curiously quiet about North Korea. And it just makes me wonder, and perhaps I'm being cynical here, but it makes me wonder if Congress was loud under Barack Obama about having to take actions for overseas aggressions and hostilities and statements and so forth. And I wonder if they were loud under Barack Obama because they know that they could be loud under Barack Obama because he wasn't going to do anything. And now under Donald Trump, perhaps they're a little bit more hesitant to be so equally loud because they think, hey, here's a guy who might actually do something and not just go the diplomatic route. So I wonder if they're just so busy testing the political winds that they don't want to come out on one side or the other just yet because they're unsure of what Trump really would do. And I have to say that that's actually a good position for the White House to be in. You do not want a White House that's going to telecast for the entire world whether it will put military action in play or not. You want to leave everything on the table so everybody overseas is kind of on guard about what America is going to do, because really that makes it a little bit safer. If you have North Korea unsure what America is going to do in response to some sort of aggression that their leaders made, that's a good position for America to be in. I think as far as the War Powers Act and the 60 days timeline, I am not a fan of the War Powers Act at all. I believe that war should be declared by Congress as called for in the Constitution. I do not like this trend over the last decades where presidents get to take a little bit of military action by themselves and then they can go back to Congress and get permission. I understand the reasons for that was supposed to have been in order that the president may act quickly and unilaterally in the face of a dire threat. But honestly, Congress can do the same thing. It's not like we have congressional members going back to their home states to farm land and where you have to send out people by horses to deliver the message, hey, we have to come back to Congress for a session. They all live in D.C. now. They're all just a short train ride away from getting to the floor where they can enact an emergency measure to declare war or to give the president the right to act unilaterally for a certain point in time. So I'm not a fan of the War Powers Act at all. I do think Congress should get together and start talking some scenarios about what they're going to do with North Korea should Trump go to them for quick and speedy action.
But there's a larger issue as well, and that is our military underfunded? Are some of our antiquated systems because there hasn't been new defense initiatives? Should these kind of things be taken up on the floor for appropriations to invest in the infrastructure of our military, to update our Air Force, to update our arsenals, to modernize many of the systems that haven't been touched in 20 years since the last major initiative? And if we use the resources we have, do we have a backup system for replenishment? Do we have the stockpiles to engage in any kind of international campaign of any kind?
It's a big concern, especially when you consider that China for the last few years has been really busy building up their own military, particularly their Navy system. And America under Barack Obama, of course, was more concerned about transgender rights in the military.
Right.
And, expanding roles for women and so forth, and not so much on building up the military equipment. And he did cut the military by double digits. I believe the recruitment has gone up under Donald Trump, but he's only been in office a few months, so of course there hasn't been time to do the full build-up that we need to wipe out and bring us back to where we were before Barack Obama took office. I do think America still has the strongest military in the world. China is challenging us on that strongly in recent years, but as we are right now, we could definitely take on overseas conflicts and come out the winner. Where we would be stretched thin is if we try and keep presence in all the nations that we're in now and try and keep our military power built up in those areas, and meanwhile have to fight off a concerted military battle with, say, North Korea.
There was a point in time where the announcement was made that there was going to be a troop reduction once Mosul came back into the hands of the Iraqis, and that half of those troops were to go engage in Syria. But I haven't heard any updates, and Mosul several weeks ago came back under Iraqi control, and ISIS has relocated to Libya. Big surprise. That all of a sudden Libya's back into this. So, that reopens the whole Benghazi dialogue, that whole narrative, what we did there, what we didn't do there, and why ISIS feels compelled to set up shop in a place that we left a huge vacuum, and they seem to come behind wherever we have been and left a vacuum. That's where they migrate to. So there's a delicate balance going on between these credible threats from North Korea, what's still happening in Syria, Russia's involvement in the Middle East, Russia's position. What would be their position if China engages in North Korea and we back China? Where is Russia going to be? Because they're looking to sell armament to anybody they can. They're the biggest benefactors of the Iran deal that put billions of dollars into Iran's hand. They turned right around and gave it to Vladimir Putin, and he sent them planes and rockets and build up their defense mechanisms. So he's profited wildly by the Obama administration. I think there's a collusion and a half in that whole Iran deal that equipped a state sponsor of terror, a threat to America, calling us the great Satan. And we've gotten so distracted with all these other things that we really don't have, the American public does not have a clear picture, because it's like the plate spinning act. It's somebody frantically going around shaking sticks, spinning plates, and keeping us distracted. I honestly think the congressional record, we have no idea if what legislation gets passed, if there is new legislation on the floor. We used to have a pretty good pipeline, but the headlines are so filled with these ridiculous stories that America has kind of fallen into an uninformed status when it comes to what is the House actually doing, what's the Senate actually doing, what laws are being enacted. We see the signing ceremony, but it's at a high level, and it's a very small coverage of any act being signed. I know there's bills being put up for votes, and people are working on things other than Obamacare repeal and replace, but I honestly can't tell you what they are.
You raise a good point, because this is rather a do-nothing Congress since Donald Trump has come into office. And on one hand, if you're a limited government person like I am, you kind of are happy about that, because, I mean, how many more bills do we need coming from Congress? How much more legislation? It covers everything in our lives as it is. But on the other hand, it's a little bit disheartening, because the one guy who's working on Capitol Hill seems to be Donald Trump. he's done a lot by executive orders, from environmental issues to trade issues. He's been out there pushing for Obamacare. He's been out there with immigration out in the forefront, battling the public relations from the left and battling courts on that. And where's Congress on this? Congress has largely been standing idly by and letting Donald Trump carry the weight of what the American people want for this country. They haven't even defended him. As a matter of fact, there's been a concerted effort from the Republicans, no less, to come out and oppose Donald Trump at every angle. Even if you don't like Donald Trump, you got to admit that the guy likes America, and he's trying to do right by America and right some of the wrongs done America under Barack Obama. But Congress is really not putting forward that much by way of legislation that could be brought to Trump's desk to sign, because they're so busy battling these little petty skirmishes on the way, and they're so busy opposing Donald Trump and trying to act like Democrats for some reason, instead of, manning up to the fight and drawing the battle lines between conservatives and liberals. So you're right, you're not seeing a lot of legislation signed, but that's because there's not a lot of legislation that's being brought up.
My hope was there was going to be a united voice, a clarion call for unity within the party, now that there was the House and the White House and the Senate, and that they were going to start driving towards these initiatives. And they're still being driven by the liberal left. And it's been a reactionary Congress as opposed to a proactive group. And that just shows the disunity within the party, which is why so many are saying, listen, Mark Levin came out and said, listen, do not confuse me for a Republican. I'm a conservative. I'm not a party member. I'm a conservative. We're conservatives. As far as party line is concerned, we are biblical worldview, God first, then country. America, and the tweet that Donald Trump put out that said, Americans don't love government, they love God, is exactly what kind of voice needs to come out. But yet, the Ted Cruzes, the Trey Gowdies, the young, strong, powerful, legal, constitutional voices have not come together to be a single voice for conservatism and for backing of some of these initiatives. Chuck Schumer is now driving an investigation into fast food wrappers and fast food cups. This is his new ballgame. And so we're going to start to see the media watch that McDonald's is under investigation by a Democrat-sponsored initiative. Burger King's under investigation. My goodness, we have terrorism, we've got North Korea, we've got the unsettlement in the Middle East, we've got the Temple Mount issues going on in Jerusalem, and here Chuck Schumer is concerned about fast food wrappers. That's the voice that the media is covering. It is preposterous, of biblical proportion. It's laughable, but yet it's sad, because I really was expecting these young up-and-comers to unify a solid, inspired voice, and they just haven't done it.
I think a lot of Americans thought that when Donald Trump made it to the White House, that they thought, wow, hallelujah, we've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got the White House. Here comes the steamship, here comes the train, we're coming through, and we're going to toss all these leftist progressive policies that have been infiltrating our American system for years, not just under Barack Obama, but under even Republican presidents. We've got education proposals, education policies under former Republican presidents that have been pretty overbearing to a lot of local governments, never mind parents. And I think a lot of people just, they saw stars in their eyes and they thought, wow, here we go, America's coming back, we're coming back from the dead. And, I had great optimism too, but the fact is you have to temper that optimism with the realization that politicians are still humans. And, I write about this in The Devil in D.C., that no matter who is in office, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, whether it's all Republicans and no Democrats, that's still not going to win us the final war. We are in a battle of principalities here. And no matter who is in office, it's not about getting Obamacare repealed so much as it is about, bringing forward a nation that gets its guidance, its moral compass, its leadership from God, not government. And when Trump put that in a tweet, I turned around and I did a column on it called Trump's greatest tweet ever, because it was. He put forth in just a few short words what America is about. Our country is about our rights come from God, not government. If nothing else, Americans need to remember that. And then if you act on that principle, suddenly it becomes less important who's in politics, who's the political leaders. The elections are secondary because you know that God is in control of our country. And, in 4 years, there'll be a new president, or in 8 years, there'll be a new president, there'll be a new Congress. And it's still going to be politics as normal. But people who believe in the Bible have to realize that Satan controls this earth. So you're always going to be disappointed by politicians. And that's why it's so important to keep in mind our government is based on Judeo-Christian principles. Our rights come from God, not government. And fight from there, go from there, not based on who is in office and whether they're Republican versus Democrat.
Well, those are outstanding closing remarks to this segment of the Cheryl Chumley Hour. We have run out of time. Cheryl, it's always great to be with you. I want to encourage everyone to visit our Facebook page, our Twitter feed, and the link that we give you, a very special link, to purchase The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, and Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. We take you right to the WND Superstore, right from our Facebook and Twitter feeds. So get those books, listen to a conservative biblical worldview and a position that I happen to agree with. And Cheryl, it's just always such a pleasure to be with you. We'll see you back here the end of the month of August for our regular Cheryl Chumley Hour. In the meantime, we'll stay in touch. God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.